Well, hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here on our third day of our live stream series. And today we are going to kind of open it up and just talk about what comes up in the chat box here. And I'll also address some other questions that came up in the previous videos we've been talking about this month. And so as people are joining us and we're sort of gathering our thoughts around that, I wanted to address a question that came up fairly frequently. And this one has to do with how do you enter the dating world? If you've been single or you've been heartbroken, how do you begin to enter the dating world with a more positive perspective, right? Or how do you step into that without fearing so much about red flags and things like that? So we're going to be talking about that. I want to share with you 7 foolproof steps to make dating fun. And basically what I'm going to be doing today is walking you through a focus wheel to help kind of shift your perceptions around that. And as you are joining us here today, feel free to type your name in the chat box and where you're coming from, and I will give you a shout out on the call. Okay, so if you have ever struggled with dating because you are worrying that maybe you aren't getting the signals right, or you feel like you're afraid you attach yourself to a partner too quickly, or you think you have to like someone just because they like you, or you struggle to sift through your own confusing feelings well enough to set comfortable boundaries, and or you tend to beat yourself up over not being good enough or desirable enough to actually have fun in the dating scene, then this segment is going to be for you. So today I'm going to talk about the 7 foolproof steps to make dating fun. And these steps are really the answer to several common questions that I see popping up in my online communities. And those are, how do you create a safe place within yourself when you start dating or meeting new people again? Where is the line between my partner acting avoidant versus them acting normal, but I'm just having anxious stuff around it? How do I know when I'm having a real intuitive gut feeling or I'm just experiencing reactive anxiety and attachment issues? How do I know if my feelings are real? And so if you don't know me, or this is your first time joining me here today, my name is Brianna McWilliam. I'm an author, educator, and licensed and board certified creative arts therapist. I've been in the field for about 13 years now, and I use a psycho-spiritual approach with creative arts interventions to help individuals struggling with insecure attachment go from feeling confused and fearful to achieving a sense of self-sovereignty in their relationships, ideally without having to talk in circles around their feelings for hours or even years on end with no tangible result. And I do this using the MAC method, which stands for Mastery, Awareness, and Creativity. And it's comprised of 3 steps, and that is cognitive reframing, body activation, and arts-based experientials. And so today we're going to use a focus wheel. And this is a tool that I use a lot when we hang out in the cognitive reframing space. If we have enough time on the Q&A today, then I'd like to also step a bit into body activation and arts-based experiential as well. So ideally, we're going to use this focus wheel so that you can start to step into the dating world with a sense of confidence, excitement, playfulness, and personal power. So we have Todd from the USA. Welcome. Hi. We have Lizette from Orlando. Hello. Rebecca. Hi there. We have Jackie. And we have, I see Shelby, but I know this is Heidi. Welcome. Okay. So basically, a focus wheel is an exercise through which you ask a series of questions, which inevitably circle back around to the beginning as needed. And the purpose of it is to install more positive beliefs about your possibilities for love and to continue reframing these sometimes kind of negative narratives that we write around our romantic entanglements, right? So I have a few different approaches to focus wheels, but for today, this is a 7-step focus wheel that we're going to be focusing on. And so the first thing that you might do is you will try to identify the fear, right? So that's the first step. Step 1, identify your fear. So when you are worried about dating and questioning your ability to do it well, particularly if you're someone with an anxious attachment style, what I call an open heart, usually the fear is something like, I get attached too quickly, or I'm afraid I'm going to get attached too quickly. Now, interestingly, this is also often the fear of an avoidantly attached individual, what I call a rolling stone. But it's usually more subconscious because they've been practicing non-attachment for a while. So they're less likely concerned about that initially. But remember, the practice of non-attachment originally stems from that same fear anyway, right? Now, the second step is realizing what the fear is actually suggesting. So that's sort of like the deep structure, unconscious fear that's being expressed. So I'm afraid of getting attached too quickly is really more the surface expression of I don't have control over myself and I'm not capable of meeting my own needs well enough that I won't become overly dependent on someone else to get them met. Right? There's something inside of me that compels me and rolls like 2 or 3 steps ahead of me, and I can't catch up with it. And if I meet someone that triggers that within me, I lose control of myself. That's more or less the fear, right? So the third step then is to recognize the desire on the backside of that fear. Okay. So it might be the desire might sound something more like this. I can experience dating and express myself in a fun situation. I am completely capable of getting the needs that I need met in a variety of ways. I can experience dating as playful and exploratory without getting too wrapped up in outcomes and worrying about where it's going, and without being emotionally closed off or inaccessible to my partners. There is a safe play space between being all in and being all out, where it doesn't have to be so all or nothing, right? We want to believe that. We have a desire to feel that in our bones. Okay. So the fourth step then becomes you have to create a new belief statement around that. So I am fully capable of meeting my own needs, and I can expand and contract my energy as I please, while exercising discernment about whether or not I like and trust someone and how much I choose to emotionally invest over time. And this doesn't have to be a serious, painstaking process, but rather a fun and playful investigation of the divine spark that lives in everyone I might go on a date with. And rather than turning every date into an interview for a life partner or erecting walls to the possibility of emotional intimacy, I can approach each interaction as an exciting opportunity to learn more about how I respond to what contrasts each date provides for me. Contrasts that show me what is familiar and unfamiliar, comfortable and uncomfortable, wanted and unwanted, and it's all wildly useful and entertaining information. And even if at times the experience is sobering or disappointing, because that creates opportunities for me to see where I am still judging myself and others, and where I'm still operating from a small worldview and scarcity mindset about love. And that only continues to support my expansion overall. I'm so happy to know that there's no way I can actually get this wrong. Okay. So that's an example of a belief you might want to adopt. Now, the fifth step is once you've established the belief that you would need to have, like the one we just talked about, is you have to start looking for proof in your real lived experience. And then you extrapolate the essence of that and apply it to your belief statement. So you would ask yourself, in your life, what do you do and do really well? Something that you have absolutely no question, no doubt about. I know how to do this well. I can do it with my hands tied behind my back. Nobody can tell me how to do this better. This is something I just know how to do. And actually, if you'd be willing to type that in the chat box right there, one thing that you know how to do and nobody else can tell you otherwise. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. It can be something completely unrelated to love, romance, relationships. I had a student once who said, well, I know how to apply eyeliner really well. And you know what? That's amazing, because think about all of the things that go into that. There is an attention to aesthetic beauty. There is control and in the way that you hold your hand. There is a measure of skill involved in that. How did they learn how to do that? Was there a bonding process with a sibling or an aunt or a maternal figure? What's if they attended to that and they learned from it? So there's all kinds of characterological aspects that go into being willing to listen and to learn and to attend and to put into practice and to do something consistently and repetitively enough until you're able to master that thing. All of that can be revealed just by someone being skilled at applying eyeliner, right? So one thing that you know that you're good at that nobody can tell you otherwise, right? So we've got a couple in here. We have dog photography. That's wonderful. Drawing and making people laugh. Those are great examples. So then you would look at that and you would say, okay, well, what all goes into that skill that you can then apply to understanding how those skills can be transferred to the relational space. So dog photography. If you want to add to this, you can type it there in the chat box there. I'm just going to riff a little bit here off the top of my head, but like, you would have to have a way with animals. So what does it take to have a way with animals? You have to have a sense of care, empathy. You have to be kind towards creatures that are helpless. You would also have to be able to communicate well enough with their owners that they're feeling comfortable and safe. There's also an appreciation of aesthetics, the ability to frame something, understand the way compositional elements come together. That's a very deep and specific way of seeing, and also a way of framing. And those are all skills that you can bring to a relationship, particularly if you were trying to practice authentic empathy in a relationship, because right in and of itself, you are talking about a conceptual understanding of what it means to have boundary. The frame of a photograph is in and of itself, you are choosing how to bound the image that you are creating, and you create a beautiful image and by establishing what would make a balanced composition, right? Well, if I'm going to make an image, then having more space on this side of the frame, right, is going to create this visual effect that there's more attention, even though there's more space. Because there's more space, our eye is actually more drawn to the subject, which breaks up this large space, right? So in and of that in and of itself, you are understanding how boundaries work. And you're understanding it through the framework of dog photography. But if you can understand that you already get these concepts, just by being able to do that, you already get these concepts. Now just move them into the relational space. So I know how to frame things. I understand what it means to draw a boundary around something so that you create a harmonious whole. I get that there are aspects to composition. And if you could imagine composition as being a metaphor for relationship, I understand that, like in a photograph, a relationship will need to have different compositional elements like room to breathe, space between the figures. But then I also understand there will need to be points of contact, ways in which we draw our attention and focus to different areas of the relationship at different times and in a different sequence to affect a certain emotional outcome. Particularly in this case, we're talking about photography from the viewer, but if you can imagine in a relational space, the viewer will be both of the subject and the one perceiving it. And that is the essence of metacognition, secure attachment, the ability to be both in and outside of your experience. So you see, we started with dog photography, but now we're actually looking at these really deep, insightful qualities and characteristics that you already have living within you that can be extended to your belief statement about opening up the possibilities for love, right? All of that you already have. So it exists in your environment. It exists in your life. There's real world proof of that. So all of that can contribute to feeling more capable and adding this to your belief statements when you come up with recognizing the desire behind the fear. I'm afraid of getting too attached. That means that I must think I'm not capable. That must mean that I don't understand how relationships work and inevitably they will always fail. What would I need to believe? I would need to believe that actually dating can be fun and exploratory. I don't have to turn every date into a interview for a life partner. I can hold myself well enough in a harmonious composition so that I can move through multiple views and frames until I start learning enough of what is wanted and unwanted, familiar and unfamiliar, comfortable and uncomfortable, until I find something that's a good fit, right? Okay. So that's an example of how you look for proof in your real lived experience and extrapolate from that how it applies. So then you have to install those beliefs. Okay. Now, belief installation is all about repetition and practice. I also believe this is about embodiment. Okay. And so when you talk about installing beliefs, if we're talking about embodiment, so this might be, maybe you write down that belief statement and every day you take a new piece of evidence from your environment and you add it to your belief statement. And every day you read it in the morning for like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Maybe you then record that using your own voice and you listen to it while dancing around the room. Maybe it's something you listen to while you're exercising, or I like to use authentic movement. I'm a little bit woo-woo with this, but authentic movement is just when you take an idea. This is how I use it anyway. Authentic movement is, there's actually a whole structure around it in the dance movement therapy realm. But the way I use it is I would take like a belief statement like the one we just talked about. I would read it, I would state it, I would hear myself saying it, I'd drop it into my body, I'd make contact with it in some way, and then I would just imagine like how that part of my body wants to move in response to that statement. Right. And I just kind of let myself go. I'm seated at the moment, so my movement is restricted. But if I were standing up, I'd probably be moving my arms around. I'd be inhabiting my space. I'd be building out the frame. Right. I would be activating it through my body. Right. And then if I felt compelled, I might create something outside of myself, like a drawing or a scribble. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything, but I might want to see it outside of me. And that becomes an installation. Okay. And you make it like a practice in the same way that like you'd go exercise 2 to 3 times a week because you want to maintain your health, right? It's the same thing. You do these kinds of practices 2 to 3 times a week because you want to maintain a sense of equilibrium, because you want to maintain a sense of connection to your inner being and to your spirit. So that's belief installation. That's number 6. So then the 7th step is to become a treasure hunter. And this is when you go out into the world and you start playing this game. And I don't mean that in a negative, manipulative way. I mean approaching it in a childlike way, like thinking that going on dates, like rather than perceiving it as people who are going to use and abuse or abandon you, because when we have that fear, inevitably we will be approaching all potential partners as if they are future users, abusers, and abandoners. As much as we want to be with them, if we're still afraid of that, then on some level we still suspect them of being that. So we are always going to be approaching these things from a defensive position. If instead you can approach it from a childlike and playful manner, then it becomes something that's much more fun. Right. So now we're in the dating world. We're practicing these things. We're using these focus wheels. We've installed some beliefs, and now we're trying to put these tools to the test. So I want to share with you a couple of questions that can help you start to remain in practice. Right. So let's say you have gone on a couple of dates, and now you want to ask yourself, okay, well, what are the wanted and unwanted aspects of the people that I'm attracting into my life or that are in my life right now? Like, okay, so I've been on a few dates, and what am I noticing? Okay. So for example, in my own dating life, I've been on a few dates, and I ask myself this question, and I would say something I notice is that everyone I've dated is very generous with their money. They've all been kind, attentive. They appear to listen to what I have to say, and they seem to respect and appreciate what I have to say. Overall, they too are good conversationalists. They all seem to be attracted to me mentally and physically pretty immediately as well. Okay, so these are some of the great things that are popping up. Well, how might that be a mirror for me? If all of life is a projection screen of what's going on inside of me, then how is that a mirror for me? Well, I might interpret that to mean that if we're talking about money as an expression of energetic value, then maybe that means that I'm valuing myself more. I am regarding and honoring my own wisdom and knowledge. People are listening to me and respecting me, then maybe there's something that's in resonance with who I am as a person. I'm in touch with my own vitality and my own sexual energy. I'm also not holding back with respect to speaking my mind, and I'm communicating in such a way that people feel more connected to me. And so they can sense my own vitality and life force as well, and they appear to be drawn to that, right? So these are the positive things that are being mirrored back to me. Now, what perhaps might be the unwanted aspects of what I am attracting in my life right now that I might discerningly suspect could create increased contrast in my life? And I'm using these words very specifically. Not what are the red flags that I'm seeing, not what are the flaws that I'm seeing that are going to send me down a path of pain and hurt and anger and blah, blah, blah all over again. Because our language is really important in how we construct our realities. So it's not that it's bad. I'm eliminating judgment from this. It's just that it's not really wanted for me right now, because I imagine it will lead me down a path of contrast, which I'm already familiar with. And it's not good, bad, or indifferent. I learned a lot of things from that. I just don't need to experience it again, right? So it's not about judgment so much as it is discernment. Kind of like when you are curating an art show, right? You're putting together an art show at a gallery, and you're deciding what paintings to hang next to each other. You're going to try to choose images that come together in such a way that they create a visual cohesion, right? That they create an experience for the viewer. And you'll be looking for elements that fit well together in such a way. And of course, each piece is going to be unique in and of itself, but together they create a sense of cohesion for the whole show. So that's what you're doing when you're dating. Okay. Rather than thinking of that's a good painting or that's a bad painting, that's a good person, that's a bad person, it's more like that seems like it might be a better fit. And that seems like I'm not quite sure that does fit with what I'm curating here. It doesn't make it a bad painting, doesn't mean it's not going to fit somewhere else. Just in this particular show, it doesn't quite fit with what I'm going for. Right. Okay. So in my situation, what are some of the unwanted aspects that I discerningly suspect might create more contrast in my life? Well, there does appear to remain a sense of emotional ambivalence or distance within some of the partners that I'm attracting. So a lot of them tend to work too much and they travel quite a lot. They all seem to have hesitancies about stepping into their own power, and they're constrained by external expectations, whether they are cultural, familial, or relational, in like a workplace setting, for example. And so these are issues that they express in the way they're expressing themselves, and even they may just flat out say, I work too much and I travel too much, like that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm noting that. How might that be a mirror for what dialogue is going on within me? Well, to be honest, I often work too hard too. And I can be overly preoccupied with external expectations and rewards. And this makes me largely unavailable in a lot of concrete ways and terms of energy and effort that I'm really willing to put into making a committed potential relationship work. I also harbor my own ambivalence sometimes because of my doubts about being fully capable of being authentically present in a relationship. And I still fear getting hurt, which means that I still, on some level, distrust my own resiliency. And so I do feel like I'm stepping into my power more and more every day, but I still sometimes fear the envy of others, and I don't want to be labeled as selfish or an exhibitionist, right? Okay, so that's how we start to kind of break down what it is that we are understanding going on in our environment as a reflection of what's going on within us. And then we have to say, okay, well, if this is the best thing that could be happening to me right now, what else would have to be true? And so in order to determine that, we go back to the first step, which is identify the fear. So I named a bunch of fears there, but let's name one. Let's just pick one to tackle. And that is, I'm fearful of the envy of others and I don't want to be labeled selfish or an exhibitionist. So what does that fear, second step, remember, what does that fear actually suggest? That other people's opinions detract from my value and the value of what I have to offer the world. And that by just doing and being who I am, I might hurt somebody else and incur their wrath. Thus, there is no circumstance in which it is permissible to actually be who I am. Okay, so let's notice the desire on the backside of that fear. I want to believe that it is permissible to be me. I want to feel free to express myself without fear of hurting anybody, right? So I'm not going to go deeply into, I'm not going to go through all the 7 steps again, but you can see where we would continue. And that's why it's a wheel, because you circle back around, right? And so the more you do this and the more you add to your add to and install those positive belief statements, the more you start to reframe the constructs that you've got going on in your head, and ideally the synaptic pathways that support those constructs as well, especially when you start to do the body activation, right? When you start to install the beliefs in a more visceral way. So those are 7 steps to help you enjoy dating. 7 foolproof steps to make dating fun, right? So the other piece of that, so that's kind of like an example of cognitive reframing, right? So then we move into the body activation, and then we move into the arts-based experiential. So as I said before, that would be where you would take this belief and you would bring it into the body. Okay. So I might maybe just as an experiential right now, if you're watching this live, you can do it with me now, or if you're watching it on a replay, you can stop this video if you need to, or just keep going. But you just take a deep breath and allow yourself to really sink down into your body. Just imagine your crown opening up, inviting all of your energy, which typically floats just above our heads, down into your sacred temple. Just imagine all your energy coming down, down, down into the body, sinking into you. You're soaking up the fullness of you, almost like a sponge. And it makes you a little bit heavier to the point where it's almost as if you're molding your body to mud. You're just sinking into a bed of mud. Noticing your contact between your feet and the floor. You might even imagine roots extending from the soles of your feet down through the floorboards of your home, down through the foundations of the building, down, 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 further still down past the layers of rock and crust and soil and water, down, down, further still into the earth's molten core. And as you reach that molten core, Mother Earth takes your roots and she wraps them around it. She's so happy you came. She's been waiting for you to respond to her invitation. And as she does so, there's a heat and a warmth and a nurturance that spills into those roots, reverberating all the way up, 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 back, up, 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 spilling into your feet, filling you up past your ankles, your shins, your calves, your knees, your thighs, your hamstrings, your buttocks, your hips, your pelvis, pouring into you this nourishment and upwelling, filling you up past your abdomen, your chest, your ribs, your lungs, your heart space. Another breath in, taking up even more, filling you up past your clavicle, your collarbones, your shoulders, your arms, your forearms, your hands, your thumbs, your fingertips. Just keeps going past your neck, your chin, your jaw, your cheeks, your nose, your mouth, and your lips, your eyes, your eyebrows, your brow, your ears, your skull, the top of your head. You are filled up with all of you, and filled up with all that is. And if you have a fear around dating, it may be the fear that I identified. I'm too afraid of getting too attached. Or maybe it's a fear like I'm afraid of getting it wrong, or I'm afraid of making the wrong choices, or I'm afraid of getting manipulated, or I'm afraid of being controlled. I'm afraid of losing control. Just take a breath. Imagine whatever question feels most prominent for you, almost like a stone. And it's probably hanging out inside your head because you're thinking too much about it. So imagine all the energy you get tied up in that question, becoming dense and concentrated, almost like a stone. And I'm going to have you fold your arms over your belly. Hold yourself, hugging yourself. And I'd like you to imagine that in your belly and in your embrace, you have a bowl. I call it your sacred bowl or a basin. And you're going to take that stone in your head. Now, on your next exhalation, drop it down into your bowl. Just drop it down. As many times as you need to pry it loose, just drop it into the bowl. So now you're embracing that in your bowl. In your bowl, it's kind of like a cauldron. Sort of like a magical kind of place. And there's a certain water or liquid in there, in this bowl. And as you look down into the bowl, you could even nod your head a little bit as if you're looking down into the bowl. You're going to notice a reflection in the water. And it's going to be a gift that this fear has for you. And it's likely to be connected to the desire on the backside of the fear. So just take a look at the reflection. And if you're someone who struggles with visioning, just imagine. Just imagine the first thing that comes to mind if you were looking inside a magic bowl, gazing at the reflection of the water. What is the first image that would flicker across the surface? Breathe it in, that witnessing almost as if it is a fragrance. However it revealed itself to you, just taking it into your body, embodying it, installing it. Letting it sink in through the breath, into your bloodstream, pumping from your crown to your toes, from your fingertips to your nose, just letting it become cell memory, body knowledge. And even if the wisdom is not immediately understandable to you, just trust and know that in time, through your own creativity, imagination, dreams, synchronicities in the environment, intuition, the deeper wisdom will rise to your conscious awareness. And if action is required, you will know what to do. And so take one more breath, taking a snapshot of that in your mind and releasing it on the exhale. You can let go of the bowl. It's always there. You can always come back to it if you need to. Drawing your attention back into the room, back into the present moment. You might even retract your roots, noticing the contact between the feet and the floor. Noticing the most subtle sensation you may be having and the most prominent sensation you may be having. You might wiggle your fingers and your toes, and I'm going to count backwards from 5 to 1. And when we reach 1, we can release this practice. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. So, if you are willing to share some of what came up for you in that experiential, I'd love to see it in the chat box there. And it could be the fears that came up that felt the most resonant for you. It could be the way that you experienced your bowl, what you noticed about your bowl. We went through this experiential rather quickly because we're on a live stream here, but in my live group coaching programs and private sessions, we go a lot slower. So we might just establish the bowl first. So that might be something you notice or that strikes you. You might be what you noticed about what happened on the surface of the water when you dropped the fear into the bowl. You might have noticed something just about how it felt in your body. Maybe it was really hard to imagine. Maybe it was really hard to call up images in your mind, but maybe you experienced it in your body in some way. Being alone. Rejection. Sure. Yeah. And what happens when you drop those things into your bowl? And remember, this is a bowl that is nourished. So when we do practices like this, it's important to ground in first. So that was why I had us establish a connection to the body. So noticing your most subtle sensations and your most prominent sensations. So we're bringing us into the present moment, noticing the contact between your feet and the floor, melting into mud, right? Really sinking into the supports that hold you, noticing how your body experiences support, because oftentimes fears of being rejected or alone is because we don't have either adequate support systems or we're afraid we'll be without them, right? So starting to experience like a body construct for support, and then imagining extending roots into the earth. Truly, a connection to self is oftentimes a connection to nature. And so if we can use the natural metaphors, then it's actually usually a lot easier for us to start to access the internal feeling states and the internal space. So going into the earth, imagining that earth is a mother that's inviting you, that's been waiting for you, right? Not rejecting you, but inviting you, and that you can be filled up with that. Imagining what it is to be filled up, because so much of our fears like this usually portray a sense of vacancy, right? They leave us feeling empty. And emptiness, if it is abundant emptiness, is not empty at all. It's spaciousness, right? It's spaciousness, and spaciousness is about allowance. But that's not the same thing as vacancy, right? So when we breathe, we are creating a construct of spaciousness, because when you breathe and you create internal space, you realize there is an internal space. There is one. There isn't the absence of one. There is one. So that's kind of the paradox there, right? Okay. So that's a sort of form of a body activation. That's like step 2 of the MAC method, as I mentioned before. The third step would be to externalize it in some kind of arts-based experiential. Could be music, could be art making, poetry, writing, dialoguing. I use art making more often than not, and then I dialogue with it. But it could be externalizing it in some fashion, and I recommend externalizing it in a fashion that allows you to exercise your creativity. And again, there's all forms of creativity, like little c creativity and big C creativity. So little c creativity is like the creativity that you express on a daily basis. When you think of a new solution to a problem, when you cook a new recipe, when you figure out how to fix your kid's toy in some fashion, right? And then big C creativity is like when you start to think the big thoughts and you start to express yourself in abstract ways and you start to approach it as if it is an art form, right? Okay. So we are a little bit beyond our 30-minute mark today. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining me here on this live stream call. And next month, we're going to continue posting a new series of videos, and I will probably come back for a couple of live streams next month. I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to be in Playa del Carmen on a resort. Why, you might ask? Because I am writing a book. And next month, I am finishing the first draft of my book. I'm so excited about it. And so I'll probably be doing a few live streams from the resort just to share a little bit of that process with you. If you're interested in being a part of the process, I do have a private Facebook group called Brianna's Book Club. And this is a group of individuals that are willing to do some of the work with me and share their experiences with me. And some of that may wind up in the book. So there are a few hoops that I ask you to jump through because I will need your permission to share what you share with me in the book. But if that's something you're interested in, I'll include a caption to that and a link at this video as well. So thank you so much for joining me here today, and I look forward to seeing your comments and questions in the feed.